Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations on the film, first of all. You know, just last night you received an award. I mean, the film has been nominated for everything from Golden Globes to Academy Awards. Regina won that amazing Golden Globe for her performance. Let's start at the beginning. If Beale Street Could Talk, based on a James Baldwin novel, that is not an easy thing to achieve, to turn not just a novel, but a James Baldwin book into a film. Where did you even start?
Yeah, you know, I started without the rights to the novel. I'll say that up front. I just went to Europe and decided I would adapt it. And not thinking, oh, I have to get permission from someone. This is a published text. I was like, I'm just going to do it. And so I did it and came back and realized, oh, and now you have to actually legally be able to do this.
Right.
But for me, Mr. Baldwin had many voices he spoke in. The two voices that were most prominent to me, the one voice was obsessed with sensuality, romance, interpersonal relationships, and the other one just as passionate about systemic injustice. And in this book, there's this relationship between this young couple, Tish and Fonnie, and I felt like that was just like the best vehicle to blend his systemic injustice, all these things he said about American society, and the things that bond us and bind us in living in this country, they were just fused in the story of these two kids.
Right, and many people may know James Baldwin. You know, obviously he's been brought up in conversations around Ta-Nehisi Coates. People may know his essays, but not many people are familiar with him as a novelist. And this story was really interesting because, as you said, it's a story about Tish and Fonnie. It's a love story, but it's a love story that is taking place in a time in America, which is familiar to some today, but it was really more intense before, when you really could not be a black person living free in the United States. Yeah,
you know, we talk about like aggressions, microaggressions, and I think that you have to think of this period, the early 1970s, as a period where, you know, black people have now arrived. The civil rights movement has sort of come and everything is great, and Vietnam is happening, and there was almost like this clapback where it's like, okay, now you have these rights, but now we want to show you just how we can still enact, you know, all these aggressions. And I think this young man in this book, Fonnie, gets caught up in this system that is so very easily manipulated.
And that system is, I won't spoil anything in the movie for you, but what happens very early on is we learn that Fonnie has been accused of raping a woman, right? And the story takes place in Harlem and the Bronx, and he's been accused of raping a woman, and he has an alibi, but his alibis are worthless because they're black people, unfortunately. And you're seeing how the story plays out. But what's interesting to me in the story is you have characters who are his family, who feel for the woman who has accused him of rape. When you're writing that and when you're creating that, why is it so important to have that moment where you have people whose lives are being destroyed because of somebody else's accusation, and yet they are still sympathetic to the woman's cause? Because in the movie there's a powerful scene where one of them says, do you think she was even raped? And the woman, her friend, Tish's sister turns to her and says, sister, don't ever say that. I know what women go through. She's not lying. But I know Fonnie didn't do it. Was that difficult to create, and why was it important?
You know, it wasn't difficult to create. I think it's a function of James Baldwin, to be brutally honest. And I think, you know, the book is about trauma in a certain way. And I think these things we're going through in America right now are also about trauma, you know, talking about it, acknowledging it, and then creating the tools to deal with it. And so I think in this book, you have all these human beings, because it's James Baldwin, who have access to their full humanity.
Right.
So acknowledging this woman's trauma does not mean that we're also denying Fonnie's innocence.
That's interesting.
And really, when you break down what's happening in this book, Fonnie's not falsely accused of anything. These two people have never met. He's been placed in a police lineup by a cop who you see has a vendetta against him.
Right.
And the system is so easily manipulated that all it takes is for this cop to say, this person was here, and now you're trapped.
Right.
Now you're caught up in the system. And what I loved about making this film, you know, I'm not a woman, James Baldwin is not a woman, and so I had to check my directorial ego and trust Regina King, Kiki Lane, Anjanou Ellis, Tiana Paris, Emily Rios, all these women. And there was a point where I was like, can we really deal with this stuff, you know? Can we really touch all this very sensitive tissue, all these grenades Mr. Baldwin has left us?
Right.
And to a woman, they all said, we have to acknowledge this. You know, if we don't acknowledge this woman's trauma, that is more of a trigger than trying to remove the trigger from the narrative.
Right.
And I think when you process it that way, you can very clearly see, so long as we're treating everyone as a human being, acknowledging everyone's trauma, then we can really get at how these systems disenfranchise all of us.
What was interesting about the movie as well is that I've seen many movies that tell the story about black people's pain or suffering. What I haven't seen a lot of is stories where you are experiencing black people living life as a combination of pain, suffering, joy, you know, love, passion. All of these things are taking place simultaneously. you know, a lot of the time it feels like it comes with the filmmaker, but do you think that it makes a difference in who is telling a story as to how they see the story to be told?
I think it does. You know, this is a very simple story, and I think we've seen a version of the story where a character like Fonny is dehumanized, you know,
Right.
and in the wrong hands, that's the version that ends up reaching the audience. I think in the hands of James Baldwin and these wonderful actors, and I guess ultimately myself, the humanization of these characters comes part and parcel. So you're right. There is joy, there is love, you know, there is birth, to be honest, despite the despair that the characters are undergoing. And to me, that was a part of like really sort of endeavoring to bring James Baldwin to the screen. He's a very interior writer. It's all about the interior life of the characters.
Yes.
But what I love about working with people like yourself, you're a wonderful actor as well, is you can take all that interior language, you know, what Hemingway referred to as the iceberg, all these things beneath the surface, and bring it out so that a person can walk to the auditorium and understand that a young man like Fonny, which Stephan James, who plays Fonny, based a lot of his character on the ordeal of Khalif Browder, and I'm sure your audience knows exactly
Yes.
who Khalif Browder is. And you can see in these 2 hours just this whole world of possibility that is unfortunately being corroded by the system.
One thing that's really powerful about the entire film, and I honestly would tell everybody to watch it, it's not just beautiful in the way you've shot it. Congratulations. The acting is phenomenal. The storytelling is beautiful and different. You know, we live in different times and in different periods. It's not just linear. But what I really found fascinating and different was that there was no bad guy.
Right.
It really was a story about a system that has been created and we are all living in and experiencing at different levels. That seemed like a very conscious choice because it was, these families were experiencing the system and it wasn't like, there's the bad man, let's get him and then the story is saved.
Yeah, you know, we've been telling stories, cinematically at least, for about 100 years. And somehow, some way, over the last 20, 30 years, the format of those stories have been reducing, have been shrinking. You know, there are good guys and bad guys, and that's it.
Right.
I think when you have it that way, it's really easy to stand outside the story and go, okay, I'm with the good people, and those are the bad people, so this problem is not mine.
Right.
I think when there's no bad person, you know, when everyone is very gray, and we can see how we all play a role in the system, then it comes from the screen and it goes into your life. You can understand how when I go to the ballot box, I am now empowering the system. Even though I think I'm not participating in it, I definitely am. And James Baldwin published this in 1974. He knew all about systems. It's why the story is still so relevant to today.
It's an amazing story. You are truly one of my favorite directors. Congratulations again. Good luck for the Oscars. If Beale Street Could Talk is now in select theaters nationwide and opens everywhere January 18th, you really want to watch this movie. Barry Jenkins, everybody.